All right, so 13, here we go. The best thing really would be to read it as a whole, because I'll tell you this, that let's just say chapter 13 summarizes Revelation. Think of 13 as the summary, in that the general meaning is this. As we just read from chapter 12, Satan was cast out of heaven. He knows his time is short. He's determined to do as much damage as he can. To cause that damage on earth, he delegates his power to two beasts who are the central figures in this chapter. And who those beasts are have stumped people since it was written. There are good guesses. I think, again, some things that we've talked about in recent years, given the recent developments in the world, we might be better at honing in on what those beasts may be, what they may look like. And we'll talk about that tonight and see what the Lord would reveal. But here we go, 13, and does somebody want to read that whole chapter? Mark, what you got?
And I saw a beast coming out of the sea. He had 10 horns and 7 heads, with 10 crowns on his horns, and on each head a blasphemous name. The beast I saw resembled a leopard, but had feet like those of a bear, and a mouth like that of a lion. The dragon gave the beast his power and his throne and great authority.
Stop, who's the dragon?
Satan.
Right, we just talked about that in 12, right? Okay,
Yeah.
okay. He's that dragon, the ancient serpent, cast down. Okay, go ahead.
One of the heads of the beast seemed to have had a fatal wound, but the fatal wound had been healed. The whole world was astonished and followed the beast. Men worshipped the dragon because he had given authority to the beast. And they also worshipped the beast and asked, who is like the beast? Who can make war against him? The beast was given a mouth to utter proud words and blasphemies, and to exercise his authority for 42 months. He opened his mouth to blaspheme God and to slander his name and his dwelling place and those who live in heaven. He was given power to make war against the saints and to conquer them. And he was given authority over every tribe, people, language, and nation. All inhabitants of the earth will worship the beast, all those whose names have not been written in the book of life, belonging to the Lamb that was slain from the creation of the world. He who has an ear, let him hear. If anyone is to go into captivity he will go. If anyone is to be killed with the sword he will be killed. This calls for patient endurance and faithfulness on the part of the saints. Then I saw another beast coming out of the earth. He had 2 horns like a lamb, but he spoke like a dragon. He exercised all the authority of the first beast on his behalf, and made the earth and its inhabitants worship the first beast, whose fatal wound had been healed. And he performed great and miraculous signs, even causing fire to come down from heaven to earth in full view of men. Because of the signs, he was given power to do on behalf of the first beast. He deceived the inhabitants of the earth. He ordered them to set up an image in honor of the beast who was wounded by the sword and yet lived. He was given power to give breath to the image of the first beast, so that it would speak and cause all who refused to worship the image to be killed. He also forced everyone, small and great, rich and poor, free and slave, to receive a mark on his right hand or on his forehead, so that no one could buy or sell unless he had the mark, which is the name of the beast or the number of his name. This calls for wisdom. If anyone has insight, let him calculate the number of the beast, for it is man's number. His number is 666. That's the scariest part of this whole book.
Yes.
But
But,
I have Jesus.
Amen.
There you go.
amen.
Our names are written in the book.
Well,
Yes, yes.
So if you notice, things change radically, right? At the end of 12, again, there was this battle in heaven, and woe to the earth, for the devil's come down to you with great wrath, right? Because he knows his time is short, and he gets right to work. The next thing we realize is this beast comes out of the water, it says. Now, various interpretations of what that is. In Judaism, in some of the extra canonical texts, let's say extra biblical texts of the day, things that came out of the proverbial water was a Gentile nation. It wasn't the Jewish nation. It just speaks of another nation. So it's not Israel per se. It's something else that's coming. There's a beast coming out of the water, and then there's a beast on the land. Those are the two beasts. Okay, what are they? Are they individuals? Or are they systems? Okay, let's look. Okay, John, he sees this beast coming out of the sea. The beast has 10 horns and 7 heads. Some people are trying to draw that. What does that thing look like? Do you think it's literal? Or is this symbolic? Because again, Revelation is a combination of both what is literal and what is symbolic. Is this a literal creature that comes out of the water that looks frightening and, oh my goodness, everybody's scared by it and worships it?
That appears more
Symbolic?
It appears that way.
Okay. I will tell you that, there were some folks up to maybe 30, 40 years ago would say, oh, these stood for something that already happened in the past. John was writing about what was happening in his day. The 10 horns stood for the 10 Roman emperors. And there's 10 we can name that are they were vicious, they were terrible, they were beast-like. They chewed up Christians. The Christians were the target. Again, when you look at the whole context of Revelation, there could some of the things John was getting from God in the vision, did it apply to his day and a future day? We've talked about this before. There are scriptures that apply both to the moment it's given, but it also has another meaning. It also refers to something that's going to happen in a millennia away. Well, sure. That's very possible. So it could be for the readers at the moment to give them a little understanding of the day that they're at. God knows there's this beast that's after you, that's coming to get you, that's killing you, because they were being killed. I mean, it was inhumane. It was slaughter. What was happening to the church at that time? So imagine if you're a Christian, and as John receives this, and it's distributed again to the churches, the 7 churches that I mentioned in the first few chapters, and you're reading it, you might be thinking, well, of course we're in the tribulation. We're in it, because this is what's happening to us. And maybe you would think, yeah, there's this beast that's after us, and it's the Roman Empire. And it's these godless, wicked, merciless emperors leading the charge, leading the genocide of the church. Sure. But 2,000 years have passed, and Jesus did not return, which is part of the story. So we might say, well, it had a message for them in their day, but there's still a message in our day. We've talked about this before, that we might look at it and say, given what's happening today, and the beast that wants to come against God's people, and come against Jerusalem itself, Israel itself, and I'll just say that on our program Behind the Curtain today, as Doug and I were talking about Donald Trump's moving the embassy to Jerusalem, God bless him, it's phenomenal, that that we need to understand why Jerusalem is so important to God and why it's such a big part of his heart. Well, and I'm just gonna, here's the Oreo cookie, okay? Earth started, our story started in that area. Adam and Eve, the flood is issued from that area. It is the place where Abraham, right outside of Jerusalem is where Abraham is about to sacrifice Isaac. It's where David, on the same mountain, it's where David buys from Onan this piece of land where he sets up the first altar, where he later erects the temple on that very site. He has his son build it right on that site. It's the very place where, as centuries go by, there is war over that area. There are foreign countries that come in and try to, take Israel out. It's where the Son of God comes. It's where he ministers. It's where he rides into, on the last week of his life before going to the cross. He's crucified right outside of Jerusalem on the hill where we believe, again, Abraham was back to almost sacrifice Isaac. It's that same area. It is where Jesus is going to return. It is where he is going to create the capital for earth. And if, every state has a capital, and if the world has a capital, I've said this before, it's Jerusalem. That's the capital of the world. And how do we know that? Well, God says so. He says through Isaiah and through Jeremiah, he says, I have chosen Israel as a place for my name forever. Well, yeah. That's his headquarters. It's where he demanded the temple to be built. That's his house. That's the White House in the capital. It's where Jesus is going to return. It's where the Antichrist, even before Jesus returns, is going to sit and say, no, I'm the guy. I'm in charge. I'm God. So it is everything. It is the beginning and it is the end. It is as the Bible calls the navel of the world. It's your belly button. He goes, this is where I've poured my life. It's where life began. It's where everything goes. And this is my mark, that I've given life to the human race and to a chosen people. And it's where Jesus returns and will reign. And John in Revelation 21 sees what? A new Jerusalem coming down on that spot. Jerusalem is big news. Is the apple of God's eye, he says. So, we've got the final battle that takes place in this area. We're going to see in the next chapter the 144,000 of these young men that are following hard after God, that they're all about this place. It becomes, again, I think I said it last week, it's like Custer's Last Stand. But it's the place where everything is completed. It's the final showdown of good and evil. And whoever is coming against Jerusalem in the end days, because in the end days, it's going to be the stone that all the nations will stumble over, right, if they especially attempt to remove it. And God bless Donald Trump, that he did what he did with the embassy, and Bibi Netanyahu, he said yesterday, he said Donald Trump is the first world leader to recognize Jerusalem as the capital of Israel, and 6 countries followed suit right afterwards. 6 countries all of a sudden they said, "Oh, we have plans to relocate our embassy too." All it took was one brave man, who people believe it or not, God clearly. What that guy has done this week. I mean, listen, he kills the Iran nuclear deal. He makes sure we got 3 hostages from Korea returned. He takes out the 5 most pivotal leaders of ISIS. This is his week. Of course, the news just demonizes him and says how terrible he is. They have no idea because they don't look through a biblical lens. And Donald Trump, again, he's got a brand new lease on life, looking now at life through a biblical lens. And like Cyrus, he doesn't even know half of what he's being used by God to do. He don't know. He's just doing it, but he's falling in line with prophecy. Right? It's very interesting. God can use anybody, right? And that's something we always got to remember too, especially anybody who's got a hard time with Trump. Listen, did he save you? If he could save you, if he could use you, are you humble? He can use Donald Trump. I'm going to say for a moment, I'm more spiritual than Donald Trump.
70 years since Israel became a state. is when the capital was put back into Jerusalem. How many years between Babylon taking Daniel to, wasn't that 7 years?
70 years.
Yeah, 7 years.
7 years.
7 years.
Yeah, very interesting. Well, and here's the thing, it was 3,300 years ago that Joshua first enters Canaan to take it over, okay? And that's the very first time it's actually in the book of Joshua where Jerusalem is mentioned for the very first time. And that's 3,300 years ago. And it's that time as they're driving out the Canaanites that they arrive in Jerusalem, and that's where they make that main camp. And you know, we have the dispersion that comes after 70 AD when Titus, the Roman emperor, comes in and he takes out the Jewish people. Some still remain, but most fled, and we call it the dispersion. That's why James opens his letter in the New Testament saying to the 12 tribes in the dispersion, because it's time. There's movement. They're getting out of there. They're fleeing, and they don't return until 1948, for the most part. But that's also fulfillment of prophecy. God said, "I'm calling my sons and daughters from the ends of the earth," and He calls them back to Jerusalem. And it's all in preparation, I think, again, for the world's final attempt at rebelling against God, led by the devil himself. And Jesus shows up and he closes out history. And we are living at remarkable times. And to have Donald Trump do what he just did, it's like what he did. He to the Palestinians, to the Islamic world, he went, you know, it's like, here's the gloves and it's amazing. He's going to force their hands for something. And I think it's good. I mean, I'm the type that, I've quoted this before, I love it, from Lord of the Rings. It's where, not Frodo, but it's Pippin. It's Pippin who talks with Gandalf. And in so many words he says, there's almost like, how does he say it? Oh, I love it. It's like, I bet I have it on here. Give me a second. It's such a great. Well, here roughly goes, there's nothing worse than waiting on the edge of a war that I can't avoid. I'd rather just jump into it and get it over with. You understand? I mean, is anybody else like that?
Let's get it on.
Yeah, it's like, let's do this. I mean, if we're going to have a brawl, you know what? Let's just jump into it. Let's start throwing blows, because what I don't want to do is sit around for weeks and months thinking about it, and those that get anxiety and sick to the stomach, they're just going to worry about it. And then that'll suck their strength and their will to fight. So forget it. So it's as if let's bring it. So I look at Donald Trump and I go, I'm so glad he did that. It's like let's draw them out and see what they do. Let's see what their response is. And then you know what they're made of, and actually that's strategic, because you find out how ready your enemy is to engage. If you make the first move, you'll find out, were they prepared for that? Does it take the wind out of their sails? Do they have to regroup, rethink what their strategy is? And you'll find out, were they a bunch of words and talk? Because they make the threats. I mean, look at all the threats they make. You do something like that, we're going to bomb the tar out of you. Well, are they bombing?
No. Pretty much stepped in and it was like, come at me, bro.
Exactly. It's like, oh wow, Mike.
Yeah, I just have two questions on verse 17 and 18. Maybe just some clarification on the mark of the beast.
Oh.
What you think maybe that's all about.
Sure.
And then on 18, the number of man, 666.
Sure. And I'll get there. Can I keep moving through?
Yeah,
where we're at the
yeah.
beginning? And we will get there. What time is it, by the way?
Oh,
boy!
So if you were
It's
around,
later.
To be continued. Yeah, unless you want to stay longer. We'll see. Okay. So, trying to step on the gas. Let me say that the first beast that is described is taken from Daniel. When you look at Daniel 7, you see there's 4 beasts. The first 3 really they're the composition of the first beast that John describes, the leopard, the lion, the bear. Okay? Because that's exactly what Daniel says. And we might say, okay, these were, he's just saying these were the world empires that, have been over history, coming against us and coming against God's people. Could be. Or John is just saying something that's used. It's just that the 3 beasts, to have them mixed together is to say, boy, this thing is worse than all three. I mean, they're worse. It's worse than all those three combined. Okay, this is going to be worse than any anti-Christian empire or force we've met yet. Okay, can I just say that? Okay, and what we see about it is that, number one, the whole world, all of its inhabitants, it says, worship the dragon and the beast. That's verses 3 and 4 and 8. Look at it. So this thing is so powerful, influential, persuasive, whatever, the whole world, except for Christians, will worship this thing. Number 2, the people following the beast say, verse 4, what? Who can make war against this thing? Now, it's the people following the beast say that. Well, see, some theologians over the years have said, oh, that's what the Christians say. Like, we can't defend ourselves. Who can fight against this thing because it's killing us? Well, then, when there's a government with a military machine that is coming to get you and kill you, like, think of Nazi Germany, who can fight against it? Who's in there and who is already the target? Sure, the answer is nobody, and I would understand that interpretation of that statement. But who can make war against him? It's the people following the beast saying that. So to me, I read, I go, no, I think it's the people impressed with the beast going, who could fight against our guy? It's like the Philistines going, who could take on our Goliath? It's like, we got Goliath. Who can fight him? Okay, so maybe you resonate with that? Okay. 3, the beast, he speaks these proud words, these blasphemous words, exercises this authority for 42 months. 3.5 years. Again, that's how we understand, we put together the timetable of Revelation, and this is key, that it's halfway through what we call the tribulation, that this system appears, that this beast, this dragon really shows up. Well, yeah, that's 12. He wasn't thrown down here yet. He wasn't given full reign yet. So now he does. Now he's got it. And now he's getting the world system in place. He's got such power, or put such fear into everybody, that everybody falls and worships this thing. 4, he makes war against the saints, even conquers them. Verse 7. What do you think about that? There's Christians in the midst of the tribulation, because he makes war on the saints, and he's able to conquer them. What's conquer?
Kill them.
Kill you. Conquer you. Wipe you out. Enslave you. Okay? And he was given authority over every, verse 7, every tribe, people, language, and nation. That's the world. It's global. It's kind of scary, huh? Is that scary? What do you think about it? Verse 9. Again, I think I referred to this last week, but I'm going to go over it again. Let me back up. Verse 8. So all the inhabitants of the earth will worship it, everyone whose name has not been written from the foundation of the world in the book of the life of the Lamb that was slaughtered. And I want to remind you that one way to understand that, especially when you look at the very end of Revelation, where it says whoever's name was not found in the Lamb's book of life was blotted out. So again, one interpretation is that is a statement based on what was a custom in John's day and in this, in that area and in their time period. When somebody was born into a town, a city, their name is written in something called the Book of Life. Every town had a Book of Life. Let's say somebody has a baby right here in Rapid City, and we have this tradition where, who was born? Great. Her name is Julia Childs. Great. So we're going to write her name in the Rapid City Book of Life. When she dies, blot out her name. It's a census. The idea is that everybody's name is already in the Book of Life because you're living. But if you get off this planet without receiving Christ as your Savior, that's where your name is blotted out, because that's what we see at the end of the book. Just a little tidbit there, okay? So if you're a follower, and it's also another way to say, you're a follower of Jesus, and this is interesting. It looks like, watch this, see if you get what I get. everyone whose name has not been written from the foundation of the world in the book of life of the Lamb that was slaughtered. So, some people would say, oh, this is a support for election, the doctrine of election. Could be. It definitely says that in these days, if we take this at face value, that the Christians that are living are rock solid. Because they're clearly not everybody else but them are worshiping the beast. The Christians ain't doing it. And I do believe Jesus will give like what he did to Stephen, the first martyr, Acts 7, right? That he has this incredible strength to go through martyrdom. And he sees Jesus standing at the right hand of God, and he lets the stones come, right? I think he's going to give us tremendous bravery. Okay, verse 9, let anyone who has an ear listen. And this is something that, of course, is a statement that is spoken after every single one of the 7 churches, after Jesus says to John what he wants to be said to these churches. Anyone who has an ear, listen to what the Spirit is saying to the churches. And it's like, hey, listen up, get this. Verse 9, let anyone who has an ear listen. If you are to be taken captive, into captivity you go. What's that mean? Hey, if your lot is going to be, you're going, in the midst of all this, as the beast is doing his beastly thing, coming against the Christians, he's not going to kill all of them. He's going to take some captive. Well, that's what the ancient, that's what they always do. Ancient nations, they come in, they don't kill everybody. They're going to take some of you to prison, man. It happens in every war. Others they kill. That's what's next. If you, and I don't know what your versions may say. Your versions may say, if you kill with the sword you must be killed. If it says that, that's inaccurate. Greek language says, if you are to be killed with a sword, with a sword you will be killed. Meaning, if your lot is to be martyred, you're going to be martyred. Anybody got an ear? Listen. Some of you are going to go into captivity. Well, what did Jesus say to the churches in the beginning? Some of you, listen, you're going to be taken into prison. Some of you are going to be killed. Stay firm to the end. I'm going to give you a crown. All right? Same thing. So, some folks go into prison. Some folks, death squad. Okay? And it's, isn't it nice for the Lord to prepare us for that? It prepares you. And it helps you get resolved. And again, here's the problem. If Christians aren't prepared for that, they're going to cop out, run away, be scared. They're not resolved. Jesus tells Peter, day's coming where they're going to take you where you don't want to go. They're going to stretch out your arms, and they're going to tie this belt around your waist, and they're going to drag you off, and they're going to, And it's as if he describes how because he says they're going to stretch out your arms. Oh. And then John says that was to indicate the type of death by which Peter would glorify the Lord, crucifixion. And we know how the story goes. It's historically that he requested to be crucified upside down because he didn't want. When they said you're going to be crucified, he said crucify me upside down because I don't deserve to be crucified like my master. Okay, so we continue. How's our time? So we'll take. So we might say this beast represents the Antichrist and the Antichrist what? Government system. That his kingdom is a combination of all the cruelty of every evil government that's ever existed. Okay. And
And this is the one from the sea.
This is the one from the sea.
Yeah.
Okay. And again, it's
A system.
apocalyptic literature symbolizes Gentile, non-Jewish nations, as these evil nations that coming out of the sea. Now, all the horns on its head. And I digressed and I didn't finish this up. When I talk about Jerusalem. The horns can represent the confederation of the most invested or leading nations in this system. If you would agree with Joel Richardson, which I agree with, that it would be a 10-nation confederation that surrounds Jerusalem, and you can name them today. If I pulled up a world map, we can name them. And out of one of those nations, the actual man Antichrist would arise. Those in Islam would say it's the Mahdi, right? He's their savior, but he's our Antichrist. Right, the 12th Imam. So, all right, so y'all know that, you've heard that so many times. And there's the second beast that shows up, all right? This is verse 11. And this thing is interesting. It has two horns like a lamb, but spoke like a dragon. What do you think that means?
Apostate church. Christ-like lamb. Something like that. Something to worship. False prophet.
Okay, this could be the false prophet that points to the Antichrist and tells the whole world to worship the thing. And again, it is such a fantastic story with imagery. It's a little cloudy. But if we look at, again, Islamic apocalyptic literature, their Jesus, Isa, is supposed to appear and say to everybody, hey, listen, I didn't really die on a cross, the other Christians got it wrong, everybody follow that guy over there. Follow this imam because, and all of a sudden he lends his power and he points to that guy. It's very interesting that could be what we see in the days ahead. There is this image that this thing creates and gives life to. Verse 15, it was allowed to give breath to this image of the beast, so that the image of the beast could even speak and cause those who would not worship the image to be killed. And this image of the beast causes both small and great, rich and poor, free and slave, to be marked on the right hand of the forehead, so that no one can buy or sell that doesn't have a mark. That is the name of the beast, the number of his name. And it's a person. And all said, okay, so the beast, there's a beast system, but there's a beast person in charge of the system. This is the Antichrist. And whoever this is, 12th Imam, whoever it is going to make sure that you got to follow him or you don't get to eat. And if you, again, paid attention to any of the things that Joel has said in the past, we've talked about, or he was talking in the past, that something that Islam has always had as part of its system is to subjugate you, tax you, starve you out until you submit, and if you don't submit, then do is take your life.
I have a comment on this.
Yes, ma'am.
15. If you notice in there, it says image 3 times.
Yes.
I think that with all the transhumanism and stuff that they're doing now, I think artificial intelligence plays a big part of this because it's the image. It doesn't say it's the actual
It's not the real
person.
thing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it says it's the image. And that image can be anywhere at any time to cause everybody, well, you can't buy. I know you've been hiding out there in the bushes, but you can't buy because that image can just shine.
This is where technology
Right.
enters the
That's
scene.
right.
And
It's interesting because I know this goes off, but Erdogan, Turkey's president,
Yeah,
had a projection where he was live on stage through this projected image.
Rick Perry did the same thing, the governor of Texas.
so
He couldn't attend a
Yeah,
conference.
Green D.
Right.
It's
You
interesting.
would not have been able to tell. In fact, I didn't even know that it was just an image.
A hologram.
Yeah, it was a hologram.
3D.
So sophisticated.
People think, and even Christians I've heard them say, you know, oh, well, we'll be able to withstand blah, blah, blah. But it will appear to be so real, and I think artificial intelligence is gonna play a big part in this, because if you ever watch Skywatch, man, some of this stuff, Tom Horn is a big, you know, he's really done a lot of investigation. The things that they are doing with all this artificial intelligence would scare you to death. They are now making drones that look like little critters.
Oh, yeah.
Little ants and stuff.
Mosquito size.
Yes, and you don't even know them. Well, think if that would just play into this somehow.
Keeping tabs on you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
Well,
yeah.
and you know, I sure wouldn't argue about that, Linda. I mean, we are at a day where satellites, internet, cell phones, everybody is, by just nature of the world we live in,
Yeah. Yeah,
we're locked in.
yeah.
I'll say this. So I have a conversation with a Navy SEAL a little while ago, who asked me something, just wanted to know something, and points to his phone and my phone, and he takes our phones and he puts them down the hall in another room, closes the door, and he says, okay, now we can talk.
Really?
Since what?
Did that really happen?
Now we can talk.
Oh,
Did that really happen, or is that just an example?
No, that really happened.
That really happened. Okay.
And it's because he's, and I go, it's really that bad, isn't it? He goes,
yeah.
Wow.
because he as a SEAL, they use that technology. They go, we can get in anybody's phone and listen. And he himself is tracked. He has to be tracked because he's an asset. And
Wow,
many of us are tracked because of you just track because of what you do, and you show up on certain radar. And so, you know, very interesting. I would agree that there is something there, and if it's artificial intelligence, there is definitely a system the devil ain't gonna waste.
Right.
And technology is huge, and it is an image, and that is interesting because you go, it's an image. So it's not the actual thing, but it's something. And is that the image that is used? It's something that acts on behalf of the Antichrist, and it's going to have to. Why? Because the Antichrist, and we talked about this last night actually at our men's study. You know, the devil is not omnipresent. The devil is not God. Only the Spirit, you know, only God is everywhere at once. The Antichrist ain't. So he needs another mechanism that can be everywhere at once. Well, technology is the best substitute. Okay. And then don't forget, you know, we got this beast that also has this mortal wound. Part of this thing, there's a mortal wound and is healed. Okay. A verdict's out maybe on exactly what that is, but let's say this, that if every time there's something that God does that's impressive, like Jesus being killed and resurrected, well, the devil's going to throw his own spin and have his own story, right? So here's his version of it, and he himself is going to undergo some mortal wound and all of a sudden come back to life, and everybody's going to go, who, you know, this is powerful, how wonderful, let's follow this thing because it's got the answer to life after death, which is what we all really want, and now our hope is in this thing as the savior of our life. And that's an interesting thing to think about as well, which is why some of us were looking closely at Barack Obama. And I had a friend of mine go, well, I had a friend. He said, if Barack Obama gets shot and he comes back to life, then we know. I thought that was funny. Okay. Sorry. 8:07.
Keep going.
We could finish this. Yeah, we're about here. Okay, so let's just we're at the end. What in the world is the number? And now we get to Mike's question. Hey, wow, we're due 13. Okay, so what's the number of the beast?
It's the number of man.
It's the number of
Man.
man or a man.
Hebrew letters of his name.
okay?
What does that mean?
Here's the thing. There are many people who've tried to assign, a number to this thing. And I think probably the best thing to understand is that the Hebrew alphabet, Linda was just saying that, the Hebrew alphabet, you gotta remember, okay, Hebrew doesn't have numbers. Aleph, Bet, Gimel, Dalet, it uses the Hebrew alphabet, that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay. And so it's, they call it grammaton,
Close enough.
forgot the word. But it's when you take a letter and the number that's assigned to the letter, and you take the person's name, and when you spell it out and you add up the numbers that they actually also stand for, then it'll total to 666. Some ancient translations, by the way, are 616, just in case you're curious. You may have those in notes or something like that, but out of the ancient manuscripts we have, some of them say it's 616, some say it's 666, and that's it. Nero's name added up to that in John's day. People have taken Hitler's first name and last name, and Hitler can be, as it's added how you want to add it, comes up to 666. There's a list of people's names. There was a certain pope whose name added up to that. If it was something that John was saying in his day, that did, again, if it applied to the moment he and the church in the first century were in, and it did apply to Nero, the great persecutor of Christians, okay, well maybe that was for his day. But again, 2,000 years have passed. We haven't seen this major scenario take place yet, which is at the end of the world, so it's still going to be assigned to somebody else who's coming. Okay, now, do you have to know that to identify who the beast is? You probably don't. I think you're going to know already before having to add up to just like put the exclamation mark on the person, because I think that's what that was. That's an exclamation mark on. In case you're curious, there's this thing that you're able to do, and actually, if you get this number, that's the guy. But given everything it's going to do, we're going to already know it's the guy. I think that's pretty safe to assume. I don't know if you agree, but.
But we're not gonna be here, right? You do believe in the rapture? Pre-trib? You don't believe?
Uh-oh, this could be a deal breaker.
You should have been here a couple weeks ago. Going on for 2 or 3
Well,
weeks.
okay, that's a conversation for another time, because I know you're running.
Let's do it, you'll love it.
Well, we
We'll
were
have a
just
good
reading
conversation.
through, halfway through Revelation, and there are Christians
Yeah.
that are not worshiping this. So how could they be gone?
Because there's different groups of Christians that come through the tribulation. There's 4 groups of people that come through the tribulation. We'll discuss this later.
Okay.
We need to know
We'll discuss it,
six,
because,
six,
yeah,
six.
because there's, we'll love this conversation.
There's
So-
supposed to be pre-trib.
So, here, let me cut to the chase on this one, because I always end these conversations on this. I point out the scriptures that I think are very significant. But here's the main thing. Are there Christians in the midst of the tribulation?
Yes.
Yes.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
massive amounts, massive being slaughtered. Earlier chapters we looked at, they, untold number are killed. Untold number. Okay. It is best to prepare to go through it, in case you have to go through it. I hope we don't have to go through it.
I'm gonna be the first in line to have my head cut off, that's for sure.
Well, there you go.
I'm not gonna bother with this other beast and false prophet. Let's just do this and get it over.
Just get it over, X marks the
That's
spot. So,
That's
you know,
right.
and here's the main thing, and again,
That's right.
by the way, and I said, my wife is pre-trib, I'm post-trib.
Yeah.
Okay, I was pre-trib. And she came from a pre-trib family, okay.
She's a good Baptist.
She's a Baptist. She's a Baptist. This is dispensational theology, okay, so, and so,
Go,
we were, and in this church, I know there's folks that are pre-trib and post-trib. And to me, that is,
It really doesn't matter.
that is that important,
I mean,
right?
it really
Yeah.
It's that important, yeah. Jesus is going to
Jesus is coming
return,
back.
that's the
Right,
important
that's
thing.
what's important.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Jesus returning,
Right.
all hell is gonna break loose before he does. But Christians have always been slaughtered and beheaded, and they're
That's
being
right.
that now.
That's
And,
right.
and we don't have to wait for the tribulation, we may not have to wait for the tribulation
That's right.
before we get slaughtered. We don't know what's gonna happen in the United States, right? So what matters most is prepare, like Jesus always said, they will deliver you to tribulation, you'll be killed on account of my name. Okay, da-da-da-da. I mean, Paul tells, Timothy, take your share of the suffering that's coming, okay? That's what Christians have always been told anyway. So, our job, we prepare, stand strong, and again, so 666, who is it? You know what? The person hasn't apparently appeared yet. So, it's gonna be hard to know. My guess would be, when that does happen, the Christian wireless, the Christian community will very quickly get word out, and we'll hear different interpretations on who people are betting the 666 applies to, and you will be able to, and I believe, if you pray, you seek the Spirit for confirmation, for a quickening, or for a pause, the Lord's gonna let you know, because He wants to let you know. And again, I think the activity of the beast itself is indicative of who the beast is. Ta-da! How's that? We finished at 13. Is that we good with that? Mike, did we cover that? I wish we had more specifics regarding the beast.
What is the mark? That's all I really want to know.
Oh, hey, let's talk about that 1 second. How about that? The mark, real quick. People will say, okay, because it's gonna be on the forehead or the hand. Okay. People will say, is it modernization of, is it a cashless system that leads to it? It's going to be sold to us. We're going to be convinced that cashless society, for the sake of not getting robbed and whatever, that's the way to go. It's simplicity that somehow we buy into this thing and we take a grain of rice, chip under the finger or on the forehead or on the hand or something like that. And people talk about that today. They talk about doing this kind of thing. And this system is great, and you'll have all of your information on it.
Well,
And all your information.
some of the colleges do that.
They're doing
already.
that, and I hate to say it, but the School of Mines led in that technology.
Wow.
It's amazing. Out of the entire United States, School of Mines is the one that came up with
Thumbprint, wasn't it?
this. Yep, you take your finger and you boop, and it reads through, I forgot how many layers of your skin, and it identifies who you are, by your DNA, and now you can, and so students at School of Mines pay for their Coke and their pizza, like that. And so, that kind of bothered me.
Me too.
Yeah. So, is the mark a technological advancement, like a cell phone? See, like we've been slowly but surely being coaxed into accepting this thing that becomes a combination of human and technology, the hybrid thing.
Well,
Big-
now Walmart.
big- Huh?
Walmart, digital scanners.
Yeah.
Walmart is doing away with all of their checkers. So now they are now going to digital scanners. And they
Jackson,
that's
man.
another thing. Yeah, Sioux Falls is almost digital. If you'll notice the one, it hasn't went to the Walmart, the new one on the south side, but it has went to the one on the north side with the, they've done away with almost all the checkers.
We already live in a cashless society.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
We really do.
I
Credit cards.
hardly ever have cash on me.
Right.
So, I mean, I think it's probably just it's gotta just be a system where they can control you by technology somehow.
Yeah.
Yes, and that's very possible. They'll also say, in Islam, if Islam is the beast, if that's okay. Islam says, it talks about people taking the mark, a mark. And the mark is actually, it's a mark that's caused by pressure. It's when they kneel and they pray before Allah. And it's if you go like this, for a while you come back up, you got a red, pressure spot there in the back of the hand. That is what they call the mark. They go, that's the mark, that you bow to Allah. Okay, so meaning, are you a Muslim? If you're a Muslim, you took the mark. That's a possible interpretation of it.
Don't you think it's gonna be very evident to Christians what the mark is? I mean, we're not gonna have any
It's
doubt.
not, you're not gonna accidentally end up with it.
No.
Exactly. Hey, what's
Yeah.
this? Yeah, you're gonna have to, yeah, you will have had to have taken it. Yeah,
Spend my whole life trying to avoid this.
yeah. Yeah, so, I would agree. You'll know going in if you took it.
Yeah, they can't
And-
force it on you.
No. And again, aren't we grateful to God that He gave us the book of Revelation where we go, okay, guess what? We have our eyes open that if a group comes, a system that says you have to take this thing on you, whatever it is, and they'll describe, I mean, you just don't touch it, don't come near it with a 10-foot pole. Especially the deal, it assigns you to the beast. That's the main thing, right? And so I think if something shows up, let's say there's the warm up to receiving this thing, buy a piece of technology that simply is a cashless thing or whatever and swipes your finger. Okay, did that connect you to a beast that kills Christians and?
Yeah, it's
No, not yet.
something evident.
No,
I mean,
it connects you to very clearly this
anti-God.
this anti-God, anti-Christ thing, which is why I think that's a strong argument for Islam, that's the beast. But then again, the way our government is going, even with Donald Trump in office, the way the EU is going, they're so anti-Christ, anti-church, anti-Christian. It's like we have become the scourge of the earth. If you're a Christian, you're the bottom rung of society.
I heard a guy say last week, if the rapture happened, Berlin wouldn't know about it. He said it is just so gone
It
over
is,
the
there's
edge.
not a Christian in Berlin.
You know, and think of all these German Christians that, you know, from the 19th century and what an impact they had. It's all gone.
Isn't that amazing? Well, with that,
I have a question for you. Do you believe that the Antichrist is a Muslim?
I have a strong belief that he will be Muslim.
Okay.
I've heard it's a Jew.
Well, I was
Could
just
be.
gonna say, how could he be a Muslim and the Jewish people worship him? Let him sit in the temple?
Oh,
Do you
Well-
know how that could possibly happen?
sure. Yeah, and it's because of a false
A
agreement
false
that's made. It's a short, no, it's a short piece that is made.
Okay, the covenant.
And
Yeah,
there,
yes.
all it takes is for somebody to promise the Jews, hey, put this person in power, we'll let you build your temple, or,
Mm.
you know.
The Jews believe that Islam, that they can share a temple with them
Yeah.
because they are
That's
worshiping one
key.
God.
There's an article in the
Yeah, hey,
Journal
you know
today.
stuff as much as you want, you got information.
There's an article in the Journal today, if you get the newspaper, talking about these organizations that are coming together, so, like the Jews will go, visit a mosque and,
Oh, There's a
Muslims will
melting.
come. So it's kind of that we just can kind of live together in harmony kind of thing, so there's.
The guy
Ecumenical.
leading up to the
Coexist.
rebuilding of the temple in Jerusalem, I can't think
the
of his
Temple
name.
Mount Faithful.
Yeah, she was
Rabbi,
redhead, he got
that says,
shot
"I don't
at
exist, I
point
think
blank
you're-"
by a Muslim. But he's up on a video saying that there's no reason why Muslims can't be on the Temple Mount, that they can rebuild the temple and share it with them because they believe in one God. But in Islam, they believe that the Mahdi is the one that will allow the temple to be rebuilt.
Oh.
And so they're waiting for.
Oh, the Jews would love that. All of a sudden they'll be, the mighty becomes a hero.
And,
You let us restart the sacrificial system?
and they believe that the Mahdi will allow sacrifices for wild animals.
Well, I know everything's ready, the third temple.
It's amazing.
They-
Temple Mount
They've
Faithful,
got
that group, what they've
everything.
got.
Yeah.
All the harps are made, the golden
Yeah.
instruments are made, the utensils, the
Yeah.
brazen altar, they're ready to go.
Yeah.
Judy.
With all that preparation, going back to the old way of sacrifice and all,
That's what they want to do.
we're believers, Christ says, you know, we're Christians. Who's taking it back to the old sacrifice?
The
It's
Jews.
the
The
Jews.
Jews.
It's totally the Jews.
That's
Show what they
That's
read.
totally antichrist. I mean, they,
Yes.
when you
Yeah.
do that, you are just,
That itself is Antichrist.
the Lamb of God is
Yeah.
just out of the picture there.
But again, I mean, here's the thing. When you look at Revelation, even though Israel and Judah, the divided kingdom, through its history, has struggled to remain godly and God's people, the primary enemy of God has always been on the outside, coming against God's people. In Revelation, we don't see Jerusalem leading the charge against Jesus. We see God doing a miracle in redeeming a certain number of Jews.
Yes.
We see him returning to Jerusalem to set up his headquarters. We see him coming against, very clearly, all the nations of the world that the devil has deceived, that comes against the holy city at the end. Because somehow, as we finally get close to it, something happens where the Jews are anticipating the arrival of the Messiah, who they think is coming for the first time. They'll be shocked to go, they'll look at on this one whom they have pierced, and they'll say,
Wow.
it was Jesus.
He's been here before.
He's been here before. We was wrong. Right. And it's like it's all going to congeal. The Jews, what they're anticipating, what they're waiting for, and then surprise, surprise, is Jesus. And the one that you killed, historically, not your generation, but and the one you've not believed in, actually becomes your Savior. He shows up and he saves you from utter annihilation. As the armies of the Antichrist make their descent on Jerusalem. It's fantastic. And could the Antichrist be Jewish? Sure. He could be American. We don't know who he is. We're not given that. Where does it say the Antichrist is from blank country? It doesn't. So, but it's coming from the Middle East on a beast, etc., etc. And by what we look at, we say it's not coming from the West. It's coming smack dab in the middle of this place.
But the name of the countries that are cited are all Muslim.
They're all Muslim.
Yeah.
Syria,
The
Lebanon.
inner rim.
They are. It's amazing. So.
Yeah.
All right, everybody.